So let's take a look at some highly suspect points values that have been floating around the internet. Supposed datasheet points for Tyranids, Custodes, Admech and Sisters. Certainly the Tyranids one seems fake, but what about all the rest? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought it would be interesting enough to cover some suspect leaks for Warhammer 40k's next balance update. As mentioned, probably nothing to get too excited about, but I still find these interesting. And I feel like for 3 of them, I wouldn't say the chance of them being real is absolutely 0%, though there are some very good reasons to doubt their credibility, as we'll get into. In January, we're currently waiting for the next Warhammer 40k balanced Dataslate. Games Workshop are both going to be doing points and rules updates, and previously they'd hinted that the balanced Dataslate would be coming in late January rather than early January, possibly on the 25th of the month after the LVO. I guess potentially on the week before that. They often tend to drop on a Thursday. As ever with these big updates to the game, there's lots of anticipation for what might change. Lots of factions are struggling right now in 40k, maybe things like Knights, Custodians and Drukhari more than most, and plenty of the armies that are kind of balanced against each other aren't in the best state either, needing some of their iconic units to get boosts to have them compete with the rest, or maybe having units that just seem a bit too auto-include. I've certainly spoken to a few people who are maybe a little bit less excited to theorycraft and plan out new armies, knowing that there's a major change on the way. Often in the run-up to these, you get people getting a bit overexcited, and industrious people out there often tend to fabricate some dodgy points leaks. It's definitely happened in the past, and some of these are done to a greater or lesser amount of detail. As mentioned at the start of the video, I'd say that these are odds-on to be fakes, though occasionally these random early leaks turn out to be on the money. I've certainly had a few things in the past where I've been a bit too skeptical of things on the channel, and it turned out to be absolutely true. In any case, if you want to watch this, I'd watch it for entertainment value only. Certainly don't take any of this to heart and wait for the actual confirmation of the points, but I do find these sort of things interesting, and particularly talking about the things that they could do for factions. Getting on to the supposed leak contents, and basically what was posted around the internet were several armies' new points changes. Custodes, Admech, Adepta Sororitas and Tyranids. They look like the points pages for them out of the Munitor and Field Manual, but with a bunch of units having had their points edited with the red change marker that Games Workshop uses for them, and a bunch of points values shifted, and in one case, for some reason, the amount of models in the unit changed. Out of these, I do kind of wonder whether it's 2 leaks, whether they're real or fake. The Tyranids one looks like it's done in really quite a different style to the rest of them. It just looks different by the way that it's formatted, and if you actually take a proper look at it, it's far more obvious than the rest that it's fake. There's loads of basic editing things that just don't really quite match up. I would argue that the other 3, at least by the formatting and editing, don't really give themselves away as much as being fabrications. These were all posted to various faction Discord servers. I've seen some of them crop up on various faction Facebook groups or Reddit posts as well. Sometimes treated with a healthy dose of skepticism, often just posted without real context. Perhaps a bit unhelpful for newer players who might be a bit too keen to jump at them and treat it as read. I'm not sure what the original source for these were, I haven't seen anyone share that. Though if you do know where they were either initially posted or made up, then feel free to let me know. For the format of the leaks, they are the pictures of a digital document, and for me in itself that just makes it a little bit more unlikely. Usually Games Workshop's balance updates don't tend to leak in this way, unlike things like digital codexes which were previously shared to playtesters around the world, or physical codexes that might be shipped out in big boxes. They don't tend to be quite as leaky. Though admittedly I have seen things in a slightly similar style like the World Eater's points page. That came out back in 9th edition, and I was kind of skeptical about that at the time. Then it turned out that it was entirely accurate, and it was just some weird changes with a bunch of core chaos units being cut. One possibility for information getting out is Games Workshop sharing points early with certain affiliated content creators they have, certainly not myself, and they could be a possible source if these are indeed true, but I sort of suspect that they'd have a watermark or something on them. If GW is going to be sharing digital copies of these early, you'd expect them to do something like that as a basic protection against things just leaking straight out. On top of that, there's a bunch of other things that make a few of these just highly suspect, the Tyranid one more so than the rest I'd say. I thought we'd take a look through them for entertainment value only. Again, just to underline, don't treat these as serious until we actually get confirmation from Games Workshop, as odds on they're going to come out with something completely different. First up, for the most sus one out of any of them, is the Tyranids League. As mentioned, this one is the one that I think is most certainly fake. The points changes on them maybe aren't the most unbelievable in the world, even if they seem a bit drastic. The Screamer Killer, which is very overcosted right now, would supposedly drop down from 170 to 120, which if anything seems like overkill. Lots of things that were overcosted, like the Swarm Lord and Toxicrin, according to this document, do go down, and a lot of those do seem reasonable. However, on the other hand, the points increases just seem weirdly punitive, really. On this set of points, Death Leaper, Pyrovores, Exocrines, Harrispexes, and Maliceptors all go up, and by a significant amount. Gargoyles going all the way up to 100 as well, and between all that just seems really unlikely. At the moment, Tyranids are a faction I'd rate as kind of lower mid-tier right now, and if these changes were right, then they'd be going seriously down in the world. I know Games Workshop sometimes gets things wrong with balance updates. They did have some weird changes last time round for the Nids, but this just seems incredibly unlikely, and would be more out of touch for a balance update than Games Workshop's been in a long time, I think. However, Tyranid players really don't need to stress about this at all. As mentioned, this one's just kind of given away by the formatting, never mind the weird points changes. Say, for example, if you take a look at the Swarm Lord one, the copy and paste of the one model for 250 points is out of alignment, looking like it's just been taken from something else and slapped over the original one. And also things like a few of the title bars, like the Pyrovores, and things like the Norn Emissary and Gargoyles, they've got bits of them cut off and are thinner than they should be. Looks like the things that were edited above and below them make them a bit thinner, as there was a bit of overlap when they were copy-pasting. Overall, the Tyranid one just looks very photoshopped, and I noticed that some industrious person had shared a side-by-side GIF that flicks from one to the other. I'll link that down in the video description below, as I think it makes it really quite clear where the edits are and how things don't really quite line up with how they should be in a neat document like this. Overall, I'd certainly be happy to call the Tyranids one almost certainly a fake, but as mentioned, it does seem to be in a different sort of style to the other three, which at least by the editing look a lot more convincing. First up out of these ones, we have the Adeptus Custodes. This one's in a lot more alignment, and if it is indeed another fabrication, then it's certainly a lot better quality. I couldn't spot anything that was just an absolute dead giveaway in the formatting for this, but there were a couple of things with certain squad sizes and the points cost paid for them that do make it look a bit suspect. Custodes in current 40k are struggling quite a lot, generally considered as one of the weakest armies in the game. They were over-nerfed from 10th edition's starting place. Games Workshop does have a codex coming out for them sometime in spring, though this might not well be for a while yet, and until then it seems fairly reasonable that they might well make some big balance changes to try and get them back in the game before that, either reversal of nerfs or making points go down a bit and getting a few more golden boys on the battlefield. If these changes were to be believed, then they'd have made some fairly sweeping points cuts to the vast majority of the faction here, a lot of things going just down a little bit, somewhere like 5 points per model. Virtus Praetors getting a bit more attention, going down to 150 per 2, and Wardens listed at the same price as Custodian Guard, which maybe seems kind of curious. They do seem to get a bit more play given their massive durability. This one has the Sister of Silence all reduced, which maybe seems a little bit of an odd choice as well. It lists the minimum size of Prosecutors at just 35 points, and the Caladius Grav Tank was one of the only things that went up a little bit at 225 points. That doesn't really seem disproportionate, really. I feel like they'd still be fine at that points cost, though maybe a little bit less auto-take. Overall, for the most part, I'd say the changes here seem mostly reasonable if Games Workshop did choose to come out with something like this. However, as mentioned, there are a few things that really raise questions. Perhaps the biggest one that really makes this one look like a fake are the unit sizes on the Adeptus Custodians. They've got this listed as one model for 65 points, 2 for 130, 3 for 195, and 5 for 325. And if that does wind up to be accurate, then that should imply a squad size change for them. Previously it would be 2, 3, 5 or 6 that they could be used in, and they have those brackets due to the option of fielding 3 in a box and then making 1 a character. Honestly, the weird squad size change has me thinking one of two things here, really. On the one hand, it does feel like it's clearly something that's suspect, given it would be different from just about every unit in Warhammer 40k currently. They come in boxes of 3, and I believe every other unit in 40k had a max squad size that's the same number of models as one unit in the box, or a multiple of boxes if you wanted to buy 2, so in theory they should have the max squad size of 6. Still though, I guess it's not entirely impossible. It could just be Games Workshop expecting you to use your 6th Custodian as a shield captain. And just overall, it does feel like it would actually be more effort to bother to go and fabricate and change all the squad size numbers. If you were making up some fake numbers, that just seems like it's more effort than it was really worth. It's not even really the most exciting change in the world, so why make the effort to do a whole load of extra formatting to throw your entire league into question if you're doing it? There is another thing with the formatting on this one though. I noticed that for the one model option on the Adeptus Custodians, it's noticed as one models as opposed to one model. In every other instance over the entire points document, if you've got one model, it's listed literally as one model singular and doesn't have the S on it. I'd say this is perhaps more suspect than the squad size change even, though it's definitely not impossible for Games Workshop to make typos. They certainly have done in the past. Otherwise, the other slightly weird thing about the Custodes points were prosecutors. Their points were listed at 35 points for 4 models and 40 points per 5. As with the Alarus, you have the option to build a character out of the box set, so that's why you can fill them in either squads of 4 or 5 for the ones that you have left over. It does feel a bit strange that Games Workshop would choose to have 4 models for 35 points, but then 5 for 40. If you go into the nearest increment of 5, then that should probably be 45 points for 5 of them. Though in reality it's not really the worst thing in the world. I feel like a lot of people will be tempted to take the absolute minimum squad size, so maybe having the 5th member not actually that much more isn't actually the worst idea. Again, I certainly believe it if Games Workshop did come out with it, but given that it's not really something that they've done in the past, it does seem odd and adds a little bit more skepticism to this one. As an aside, I don't really think that the prosecutors really needed to go down in points by anything. They're already really quite cheap and quite good for being nuisance units to hold objectives and things. But I guess having them super cheap might not be the worst if it is actually encouraging you to take more of the sisters in a more Talons of the Emperor type army. Otherwise though, the other 2 pages that were posted were Admech and Sisters. Admech haven't had their codex out for too long at all, and it's kind of hard to know how much they'd mess with their points cost as a result. In general, Games Workshop tend to be quite led by tournament data and things, though I feel like they must have noticed the feedback from the Admech codex being one of kind of doom and gloom really. It does seem to be a codex release that just hasn't inspired that many people to get more excited about the faction. Just on the actual points changes that are reported here though, and there aren't many of them, it does kind of look like someone might be having a joke with this one. The only changes that listed are to the core Skitarii troops with Rangers and Vanguard going down 10 points, the Skitarii Marshal dropping a little bit, and the Scorpius Disintegrator going down to 150. And then perhaps the unit that really makes this feel like it's not legitimate is the Ironstrider Ballistari. That's listed as dropping down from 50 points to 45 points for the Chicken Walker with the twin las cannon or twin autocannon. That just feels like the exact last thing that Admech players would really want them to do. The Ballistari are already fairly good units, and you feel like you don't get very many points worth of models for the amount of money that you spend. And between both of that, they just seem like one of the least likely units in the codex to need a points cut, already being good and kind of weirdly cheap at the moment. I say the same is true to the Skitarii Vanguard to a lesser extent. Quite a lot of competitive lists use Vanguard in Scorpius Dune Riders. Again, out of all the units in the Admech Codex, they just would seem like a very, very weird unit to pick to go down further, particularly when you've got options like Belisarius Core or the Archaeopters, all of which feel pretty overcosted for what they bring to the table. And between those two, it just makes me kind of doubt this based on the changes alone, even if there wasn't anything super obvious that I could see on an editing kind of level. Finally, for the Sister Battle one, the Sisters feel like they're in a bit of an odd spot in 40k right now. Kind of mid-tier in terms of tournament win rates and doing well. But then actually within the codex and the units that people choose to win, there are some odd choices that really seem right at the front and centre of the army now, particularly their armour and things like Arcoflagellants, as opposed to classic damage dealers that might have been good in 8th and 9th edition, things like Repentia and Retributors and things. Again, couldn't really see anything particularly give away in the editing of this one if it has been, and to be honest, if this one had come just completely on its own, it feels like it's perhaps the most credible of the 3. Definitely a few things wiggling up and down that I might not really have expected Games Workshop to change, unless Sisters Repentia happen to be getting a rules change to go along with this. I have no reason to see why they'd go up to 70 points from 65, that just seems bizarre. And beyond that, they have a few minor changes that just seem a little weird or inconsistent. The Triumph of St. Catherine going down to 120 points when it was already a good unit before. Castigators going up slightly, which maybe doesn't enormously surprise me, but Exorcist going down at the same time seems a little bit inconsistent perhaps. Otherwise though, the rest doesn't look too unreasonable. Retributors, Battle Sisters, and Celestian Sacrosants all going down slightly, all seems alright. Most of the changes feel more like minor tweaks than things that are just going to be absolutely upending the faction. In any case, I'd still say that at the moment it's odds on that all of these do turn out to be fake. They do have some weirdness, and if we say we won't believe in the Custodes one, then that would cast doubt on the other 2. In my mind, I'd completely throw the Tyranids one out. I think it was made by someone different to the others. But I'd say the other ones at least look the part, even if the Admech choices would be absolutely bizarre. And there's some squad oddness going on with the Custodes one. In any case, let me know what you think below. Are these real or fake? I'll look forward to actually covering the official ones when Games Workshop gets round to them, and we'll see just how different they are from these. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly try and cover any Games Workshop news or rumours that come out. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep the videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.